All right, we're going to get started soon. I thought that this would be the best way to start our meeting, and I think that it is representative of some of the things we're going to talk about today and some of the things that we work all the time, all of us, to make the world a little better place. So I hope this works.
This song says, no matter where you go in your life, at some point you're gonna need somebody to stand by you. Oh yeah, oh my darling, stand by me. No matter who you are, no matter where you go in life, you gonna need somebody to stand by you. No matter how much money you got, all the friends you got, you gonna need somebody to stand by you. When the night has come and the land is dark and that moon is the only light we see. No, I won't be afraid. No, I won't shed one tear, just as long as your people come and stand by me. Darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by. Come on, stand by me. Yeah. Oh, when that sky that we look upon, well, she tumble and fall. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Sometimes you just need to listen to the whole song. If you're not familiar with Playing for Change, and I know the video is a little bit older, it's a really wonderful organization, and there's beautiful music and videos, and check it out. That's just a delightful one. So thanks for indulging me. It seemed like it was the right message for our conversations today. Here's our agenda for the day. I want to welcome you to the Iowa Coalition for Integration and Employment. I'm so delighted that you could join us today. And we're gonna kick off with our policy updates. And we're actually gonna start with Josie Gittler and Bill Stump, who have some kind of pressing updates and information they want to share around the guardianship and conservatorship legislation. And then we're going to move to federal policy update with Julie Christensen and state policy update with Brooke Lovelace. It's Black History Month, and more importantly, I think is we need to continue to have our conversations and start to really dive into some work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Derek Willis and Brian Dennis have agreed to help lead that conversation. We're going to have a conversation around the coalition meeting structure and what's going to work best for all of you as we look at future meetings and how to approach if we want to do things virtually or in person or a combination, and what's going to work best for everybody. And then of course we have a number of partner updates as well with, I know, Medicaid, Aspire, APSE, just a number of things. And because we had to shorten our time today, we may not be able to get to all of the updates that we were hoping to get to, but then we will find other ways to get that information to you. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I am going to turn this over to Josie and Bill, and I'm going to put in the chat again the link to the Google Doc where our documents for today are, and in that folder we have a copy of Bill's testimony that he's going to talk about, and a couple of documents that Josie's going to reference as well on the guardianship and conservatorship. A couple of resources there. If you're not able to access the Google Docs, we can send those to you now. Jess can send those to you, and we'll definitely share those when we send them out to everyone as attachments for our meeting minutes and recording and that sort of thing. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Josie and Bill.
Okay, Josie, you there? Uh-oh. I don't.
No, I want to make.
Can you hear?
Oh, there you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
we can.
Can you hear me? Say yes. I
Yes.
hope. Okay. I'm Josephine Gittler, and I'm a professor of law at the University of Iowa College of Law, and I'm president of the board of the nonprofit Iowa Guardianship and Conservatorship Association. And thank you very much for allowing me and Bill to speak. We would like to ask two things of you who are on this call. We would like the coalition as a nonprofit to register with the legislature in support of Senate File 295. And any of you who are on this call that are members of a nonprofit, we would like to urge your nonprofit to likewise register in support of Senate File 295. It was formerly had another number, but it's now Senate File 295. And we're asking you to do that because we know you are advocates
Hello?
for persons with disabilities. And the SF-295 is really needed to enable judges to protect persons with intellectual disabilities who are under guardianship and conservatorship from abuse and from financial exploitation. I'll just briefly say that a guardian is a person appointed by the court when the person has diminished decision-making capacity due to something such as intellectual disabilities, and that guardian can make decisions or help make decisions about living arrangements and health care. A conservator is a person appointed by the court when the person has diminished capacity to help that person to make decisions or to help that person manage their financial affairs. The majority of adults under guardianship and conservatorship are those with intellectual disabilities, and so I think that quite a few of the individuals that you advocate for and that you help create employment opportunities in the community for are under guardianship and conservatorship. These individuals are at very high risk for physical abuse, sexual abuse, and financial exploitation. Guardians and conservators are supposed to protect them, but unfortunately, not all guardians do. Some guardians themselves engage in abuse and neglect. There's a sheet in the materials that you've been given that has examples of conservator abuse and guardian abuse, and I'll just cite one of them. A man with intellectual disabilities, whose two of whom's relatives were appointed as his guardian and conservator. They stole more than $50,000 from him that he had inherited, and they visited him very infrequently. They rarely gave him more than $10, and the neighbors would bring him canned foods because he always ran out of food. The neighbors reported him to DHS, and that was the only reason that the court found out that he was being abused and financially exploited. The bill that we are asking you to register in support of, if you possibly can, would do this. It would make information that the court needs to have to identify those who are being abused or financially exploited and take steps to protect them, including referring their cases to the county attorney for review and possible action. So this seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it? Well, everybody should be supporting a piece of legislation that will better protect those with intellectual disabilities under guardianship and under conservatorship from abuse and financial exploitation. Unfortunately, there is a relatively small group of lawyers, and I want to say I'm a lawyer, I'm a law professor, and this troubles me, but there's a relatively small group of lawyers that say that there are guardians and conservators, many guardians and conservators that are not capable of, do not have the capacity to comply with enhanced reporting requirements, that need the assistance of an attorney to do so and can't pay for an attorney. That's simply not true. And I will give you an example of why that's not true. A survey of 90 cases of Glenwood residents, their guardians, 90% of their guardians were filling out Supreme Court forms without the assistance of attorney, without having to pay for an attorney. They were doing it successfully, and those reports were being approved by the court. Now, unfortunately, right now, the
Josie, you cut out for me at unfortunately. Are you still there, Josie?
I think the call dropped.
Oh, thank you. We'll give her a second to jump back on. And maybe in the meantime, Bill, do you want to share a little bit about some of your advocacy around this as well? And I know that a copy of your testimony is in the documents that we shared.
Yeah, in the interest of time, I think that'd be great. And then when Josie comes back on, I'll let her take over again.
Thank you.
I jump around anyway, as most of you know, so it'll work beautiful. The first thing I really want to say is thank you. I wish Josie was hearing this, because I want to thank her, and I also want to thank all of you for believing in me as an important and authentic voice. I tend to be one of the parents that comes to these meetings, and it's one I don't like to miss. And I was disappointed because I wanted to see y'all this week, but it also was bittersweet because I was in Des Moines Monday testifying and stayed overnight, and I was going to be home for one day and then go back. So it's kind of a nice rest. But I mean, that's how passionate I am, not only about this legislation, but also about ICEE. It's one I don't want to miss. The song you played is really hit home, and I'm going to connect it, because true effective guardians and conservators that are committed really do stand by protected people. It hit me as the song was playing, and how they can be as effective is by oversight that will make sure they are effective. And I'm gonna highlight, this isn't about anybody in this room. It's not even about me. It's about protected persons, whether they be a child, whether they be a teenager, whether they be an adult, and many people may have to serve in that capacity. So that's part of my soapbox. The other piece, in y'all believing in me, you, in spite of my neurodivergent self, and I am proud to wear that label, and I embrace it. So having said that, my testimony, you have a copy of, and I'll just highlight a few things that was provided to the last year to a House subcommittee last session that was looking at this, then sent to the Senate, and I believe that's where it died because they didn't agree. And Josie will probably comment more on that. So this year, a couple of weeks ago, I spoke before a House subcommittee that was looking at a study bill. At that point, it was a study bill. And also this Monday spoke in front of the Senate subcommittee that was looking at their study bill. And as Josie mentioned, it is now Senate File 295. So basically my testimony talked about myself. I'm being retired. I'm retired. I became a nurse at age 50. And prior to that, for 30 years, I worked in a manufacturing facility. I think most of you kind of know some of my history. I am the guardian for my adult son that I share with my daughter, Kara, who is on this call. And he has an intellectual disability. He's 33 now. He resides with me at this point. In 2019, prior to the new law, all I had to do was fill out 2 pages every 3 years. And it was looking back, not looking forward. And I said, I fed, clothed him, took him to the doctor, blah, blah, blah. Always approved, no problem. I just kind of did all the same information every year. And was it nice for me? Yeah, but I think I did a pretty good job taking care of my son. Not everybody is going to do that. I'm sad to report that, but it does happen. And Josie pointed out some of the situations that were abusive. Now I provide the court with a care plan and file a report with the court every year. I do use the Supreme Court forms. Yeah, they're 18 pages long, and I think y'all probably have heard some complaints from family members about those 18 pages. Well, darn it, it's information that the families should know, or the guardians should know. And if they don't know that information, I have some concerns. A lot of the questions for us are kind of NA. They aren't applicable, but they are applicable in other situations, so they need to be there. I just did his annual review. It took me about an hour. I think, Josie, did you just jump back on?
Yes, I don't know when I was cut off.
Okay, do you want me to finish? Or do you want to go ahead and continue?
When did you lose me? Roughly?
How about Bill?
Why don't you finish?
Yeah, you go ahead
Why
and
don't you
finish,
finish,
Bill,
Bill?
and then we'll come back to Josie.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that
go
would be
ahead, Bill.
good, considering where I'm at in the process here. It's not that much longer. Again, I do use the
What's that?
Supreme Court forms.
I don't
I've
think
learned a
so,
new-
no.
Pardon? I've learned a new word in this process, and it's called onerous. So the people that are wanting this to go back, so effectively go back to the old way, are using that word that they're onerous to fill out. They absolutely are not. And I think Kara would concur with that, because we kind of do it together. I don't pay a lawyer to help me. I'm not an attorney by any stretch of the imagination, and I don't want to be, quite frankly. And if you ever wanted to see a copy of that, I'd certainly be able to provide that, or talk to folks about that. And you'll see that the information on the report is the kind of information the court needs to have to make sure guardians and conservators are accountable for how they carry out responsibilities to persons like my son. I truly worry what will happen when I'm gone and someone else be appointed my son's guardian. I think most of you know Kara has 5 kids. She's got her plate full right now. And who's going to make sure that that person that becomes a guardian or conservator, currently we just do guardianship, are going to understand the system. And I don't have to tell you all what the system is like, and Medicaid and all that. And I see Misty on here, benefits planning. It's not an easy thing that's understood, but there are good people that help with that. But a lot of people, as our appointed guardians and conservators, may not understand that. What this care plan does is point out everything that is needed to it's sort of, in my opinion, it's a living document. So in the beginning, you fill out that initial report, and then your annual review is sort of, okay, you said you were going to do this. Did you do it? And if not, why? It specifically asks those questions. It's not that difficult. And that's why I call it a living document, because it builds on that. But what that will be, and I guess to my point, whoever is appointed guardian for someone after somebody passes, they're going to have that initial care plan. And they're going to have a guide. It's a living document, so they can read that and they can understand more about what that person needs. Especially the conservator portion, and Josie will speak to that. I know that families have been upset about it. I was, and I thought, oh my gosh, 18 pages again. You know, what is this all about? But I think Kara saw me getting upset. She said, okay, calm down, Dad. We'll get through this. And we did. And I know there are guardians and conservators that are confused and upset by the requirements. But I truly believe if real education is provided, they will come to understand and accept it. And I think many have. if not most. And I also want to point out that most of the existing guardians and conservators have probably already gone through this process. So what they're doing is updating that care plan. And I think I want to get on my soapbox. I was a nurse, and we do care plans. We don't do a care plan and say what we did the last 3 years. We do a care plan that says, what am I going to do moving forward to hopefully discharge that patient or give them a real good quality of living. This isn't that much different, and you should be laying those things out. My point is, why change again and go to a two-tiered system? It's just going to confuse me. And I'd heard, I don't know if this is true, but I asked, who's going to make the decision? Where do you draw the line? Somebody mentioned lawyers. I don't want a lawyer making that decision for me. I'm sorry. They work hard and they do good work in many cases, but that would be my decision. That's kind of my spiel. I can't encourage y'all enough to speak up if you care about people and protected persons and vulnerable people, to support Senate File 295 at this point. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Bill. Josie, I know that you have some additional things you want to share, and I think we're kind of going to run up against a bit of a time crunch. And so if it's all right with you, I would like to kind of summarize some of the information that I've heard in my conversations with you and Bill, as well as in some of the documents, which is the recommendation to support the Senate file is really based on the fact that if things revert back to that previous way of doing this, that there's just not enough protection in that process and structure to really, I guess, protect people who are vulnerable from financial abuse. There's other types of abuse that Josie referenced, exploitation, and some of the process that has been put in place that they're trying to revert back helps address some of those and make some more accountability. Boy, I'm really slaughtering this, aren't I, Josie? So she, one of the things that I've heard in my conversations is that there are not very many individuals with disabilities or organizations that represent individuals with disabilities who've really taken a stand on supporting this. And that we're now looking at 5 years of, the advocates who are trying to revert it back have been working very hard. And from what I understood in our conversation earlier, Josie, that it's really critical right now. People need to share what they want and how they feel about this. If indeed you believe that this provides more protection, people need to hear our voices on this, because now's the time. And so, Josie, I didn't say that nearly as well as you did, and I'm sure I cut a lot of really important things out. But is there anything you want to add, Josie, or are there questions that folks have about this? I guess my question would be, what can we do if we do want to support this? What is the ask that's very tangible for folks that we can do?
Thank you, and I'm sorry that I was cut off. I don't know when I was cut off from I was talking away, and then I noticed I wasn't connected anymore. So I think the bottom line is, please support Senate File 295, which the main thing it would do is it would require everybody who's a guardian or conservator to report the information that the court needs to prevent and to remedy abuse and financial exploitation of persons with intellectual disabilities under guardianship and conservatorship, and report suspected cases of abuse and neglect to the county attorney. How would you express your support? Well, you would need to register on the internet, the website of the Iowa legislature in support of SF 295. Please call me or email me or text me if you would like help in doing that. Also, please call me, text me, or email me if you have any questions or comments. And Amy, can you make sure that everybody has the way that they can call, text, or email me for help in expressing support to members
Absolutely.
of the Iowa legislature? Okay, and if they have any questions, thank you.
Can I jump in
know
real
you have
quick?
very limited time.
Josie, can I jump in real quick? Because Brooke did put an important comment in the chat, and I'm not sure everybody would see it, but we are opposed to House File 109, correct?
Yes, House File 109, which is the bill of I'm sorry, my fellow lawyers in the Iowa State Bar Association, and it would reduce protections. It would actually reduce protections for persons with intellectual disabilities under guardianship and conservatorship. And so that should be opposed.
Thank you, Brooke. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Josie. What we will do is we will send this information out to folks. We'll also we'll put together a short poll after folks have had an opportunity to read a bit more about this and see if individuals, we are registered, the coalition, as a nonprofit entity in Iowa. So we'll ask for feedback from coalition members on if they would like the coalition to register in support of Senate File 295 and oppose House File 109. So we'll let you guys provide input on that once you've had an opportunity to look at more information and to reach out if you have questions. Does that sound all right? We'll do
Please
that.
do, and you all know I'm available too, but I can't stress enough, please do that. You know how passionate I get about some things. Sometimes I talk too much, but
Never.
reach out if you have any questions of me as well. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill and Josie. Thanks for, taking the time to come. It's a timely issue. So we will share information, try to get feedback from coalition members, and then express what the majority would like. So thank you so much. All right, I am gonna turn it over to the beautiful Julie Christensen. It just makes me happy to see your face, Julie. And Jess, I don't know, Julie, if you have anything you need the screen for, but Jess, will you please make sure that Julie is a co-host, because I don't have that ability.
Awesome. It is so nice to see all of you hardy Iowans. I still get weather alerts from Iowa, and I'm not going to laugh. I chuckle as I now live below the Mason-Dixon line. And anyway, so good to see all of you. I think I can maybe make up a little bit of time on your agenda because if you're paying attention to all things Congress, it's been a rocky start. And so there's not a lot to update, but I thought I'd just give a quick lay of the land. And then I do have a couple things that I want to share if we have the time to do it. So let me just kind of start with a 30,000 foot view. So we are now officially in the 118th Congress. Got a later than we were hoping start because of just some disagreements in the House in leadership. And so we're still waiting for some things to settle before a lot of the outreach and work can really start to happen. But where we are at is their leadership has been established on both the House and the Senate. Committee assignments are complete, but subcommittees are just starting to trickle out. So unofficially, all of those subcommittee assignments have been made. They're just sort of not officially publicly available. And because of that, the ability to get on folks' calendars to start educating around the issues that we care about has been a little bit delayed from where we would have liked to have been. But theoretically, we have structure in place. Here's what I'll say about the 118th Congress. This is going to be a tough 2 years. We are not anticipating a whole lot of forward progress. I think the general consensus is that the 118th Congress is about maintaining ground for a variety of reasons. It is also just politically because of the shift from Democrat to Republican leadership in the House creates an interesting dynamic. We have in the 117th Congress really relied on Democratic leadership, not to be partisan, just facts. The Democratic agenda in the House was very disability rights friendly. And so we were able to get a lot of traction with legislation being introduced and passed in the House. So our focus really was on the Senate. But the dynamics have now changed. We anticipate that the Senate really will be leading the charge on most disability rights issues, and our work is going to be cut out for us in getting the House on board with some things. So that's kind of the lay of the land. It also is, the second Congress in a presidential cycle. So really there's already just a lot of what's the right word? A lot of, kind of folks are getting into their camps to prepare for the 2024 elections. So that's kind of the political context. That being said, there are two pieces of legislation that I wanted to mention that has been introduced so far. And I am going to just quickly share my screen because my brain is not able to retain information anymore. So I'm just going to go to our little action center, and I apologize that our site is under construction. So don't judge what it looks like. But the two bills that I did want to highlight, and my motivation and just kind of clicking through the site is so that you guys kind of know where you can go to get more information. But the first is the Better Care, Better Jobs Act. This is legislation that was reintroduced from the 117th Congress and is aimed at increased funding, particularly within the HCBS space, but increased funding for the direct support professional workforce. One of APSE's continued frustrations is that employment support professionals as a distinct category of direct support professionals is not highlighted in the way that we would like it to be. That being said, we are supporting the legislation in general. The second piece around Social Security reform is you'll hear this referred to as the Stop the Wait legislation, but this is legislation that is all about the waiting periods and addressing waiting periods so that people have access to benefits in a quicker time frame. This is also legislation that is reintroduced from the previous Congress. So yet to be determined where the House and the Senate and the relevant committees are going to sit on these. I consider it good news that they were introduced so early in the legislative session. But these are bills that we worked on, but did not get as much traction as we wanted in the last Congress. So we will be messaging out on that. Missing from this list, which I'm sure folks are wondering about, are two other bills that APSE has worked really hard on. The first is the Transformation to Competitive Integrated Employment Act, which is the federal legislation to phase out 14C. The second being the Disability Employment Incentive Act, which is a series of tax incentives to promote competitive integrated employment TCIEA will be introduced as is with no language adjustments from the previous Congress. To be perfectly honest, APSI is not thrilled with that, only because, as many of you know, and I think we talked about in a previous meeting, there was a significant amount of money through vocational rehabilitation that has gone into states to support phasing out of 14C, among other things. And so we really wanted to see some adjusted language in the reintroduction of the transformation bill to prioritize any appropriation getting into states that are not already funded. But at this point, there is no interest in making that change on the front end. That doesn't mean that on the appropriations end, that couldn't still be a priority, and we'll continue to work on that. But the bill will be introduced as is. The date for introduction is a moving target. It was supposed to be last week, then it was supposed to be yesterday. And so I think they're just waiting for a window when, to be perfectly honest, they want to introduce when there's not other competing news items to make, a statement around disability policy as being, particularly on the Senate side, something that the Senate Health Committee and particularly the Aging Committee are prioritizing. The transformation bill will be introduced at the same time as DEIA. There is one proposed change to the language of DEIA that has not been resolved, so that may also be holding up the introduction of the two bills. One of the things that's included in this draft of the bill is some language providing tax incentives for not-for-profits who hire people with disabilities. That's a little bit contentious in the federal advocacy realm for all of the reasons that aren't going to be a surprise related to providers of disability services hiring people with disabilities, and some in the disability advocacy community feeling like that's a conflict of interest and a possibility for exploitation. That being said, if you look at the economy, not-for-profits as employers make up a significant portion of the economy. And so, APSI's position is that we do want to see the not-for-profit sector have the same opportunities for tax incentives to increase hiring, because much of our economy right now is smaller business. And we definitely want the not-for-profit sector as employment opportunities. When you think not-for-profit, that's a wide definition, right? So we're not talking provider employment. We're talking about the not-for-profit sector of the economy being encouraged to hire people with disabilities. Still some advocacy work against that inclusion that I think needs to be ironed out. And I don't have an update since we met last week on kind of where that sits. So though that's what's happening legislatively. From a bigger perspective, I will say anticipate the WIOA reauthorization will be happening. It will be happening in some way, shape, or form in this Congress. And so for those who have sort of followed along on the advocacy around reauthorization of WIOA, in the 116th Congress, so that's 2 Congresses ago, the last 2 years of the Trump administration, there was wide objection to reauthorization of WIOA in general from the disability advocacy community, mostly because the climate in DC was such that there were concerns of losing protections and not wanting to do a broad-based reauthorization. There is division right now about that talking point, but APSI is definitely on the side of WIOA is not perfect. Implementation has been a struggle. And, there are a lot of things that we think can be improved upon in WIOA. And if we are waiting for the magical day when Congress is suddenly not divided, and we can have these conversations without worrying about partisan politics, then we will never get anything done ever again. So we want to be in the space of being invited to the table and being viewed as part of the solution to move towards a better legislation. And so that is a shift in APSI's public conversation around WIOA reauthorization. There is still lack of consensus around Title IV of WIOA in the reauthorization process. There are organizations that want protections that Title IV will not be touched, which also includes the definition of competitive integrated employment. And I would say APSI is walking a tightrope on that. We do not want to see the definition of competitive integrated employment changed. We're clear on that, but there are some provisions within Title IV that could be improved and or perhaps on a regulatory basis or a guidance basis could be discussed, particularly around the role of veterans in supports for employment through WIOA that are missing in that legislation. We also think in Titles I and II in particular, there are some opportunities to add the "and" disability in the broader conversations around what that broad-based labor legislation is aimed to do. So we know that WIOA reauthorization has been a priority of the minority in the HELP committee. It is the #1 priority of what is now the majority in the House committee, formerly known as Education and Labor, now known as Education and Workforce. So Virginia Fox, who is chair now of that committee, this is her #1 priority. This will be moving forward. We've already seen several bills introduced that pick at pieces and parts of WIOA. So far, nothing that directly impacts the pieces that we care about, but just to warn everybody, there's going to be a lot of space taken up and oxygen taken up around WIOA reauthorization over the coming 2 years. And I think that can be a good thing. And I think it could be a real opportunity for us. But we will definitely need strong and cohesive advocacy around the things that we want to preserve versus where we see opportunity to enhance opportunities for people with disabilities. I think the only other real thing that is continuing to bubble and to take up a lot of time in the DC space is continued enhancements to the AbilityOne program. So the AbilityOne Commission had released their strategic plan several months ago. There are 3 specific policy changes that are up for public comment. So we're still evaluating what APSI's talking points are going to be on that, and we'll be releasing that out for folks that want to engage. AbilityOne is complicated, and if you're not in the AbilityOne space, it can feel overwhelming to even understand what's going on. But there are 2 pieces that we're particularly looking at. One relates to some expanded eligibility criteria. The intent from the commission is that it decreases administrative burden for getting folks approved and eligible to participate in the AbilityOne program. Some of the things that are being recommended are concerning, including things like if you have an IEP, you are automatically assumed to be eligible for the AbilityOne program. And those are things that are red flags for us in not wanting to see the AbilityOne program become the next new pipeline 2 when we talk about transitioning youth out of the K-12 system and into employment. Not to say that AbilityOne does not have good jobs, and to be clear, there is competitive integrated employment within the AbilityOne space, but AbilityOne as a whole is not competitive integrated employment because any of the products side of AbilityOne that are in manufacturing centers are required by law to have a ratio that makes them outside of the definition of competitive integrated employment. That requires congressional action, and there is no will at this point for Congress to do that. So we're working with the AbilityOne Commission in the areas of where competitive integrated employment is happening and expanding that, recognizing that AbilityOne as a program itself is not CIE across the board, but certainly has potential to be. So that's something that we're looking at. The other piece that the AbilityOne Commission is putting out for comment is some interesting language around job customization, which does not concern us per se, because job customization is a good thing, but what is being interpreted is that Ability One providers will have to do customized employment. And then depending on how you choose to interpret customized employment, that could make you think that you have to align with any number of individual organizations that have their own models of customized employment with model fidelity, and creates potential monopolies around individual models, which is not something that APSI endorses. We think there are multiple models and we like them all, and we should be talking about choice in the positive sense of there are many avenues to get from point A to point B related to employment, and we don't want to see inappropriate interpretation of that policy change as putting people with disabilities in a particular box to say this is the only way that you can participate and the only types of services you can receive. So I think that's the 30,000 foot view. I feel like I just threw a lot at you. I did want to also mention that, as are a number of other organizations, APSI is involved with Department of Labor on their NEON project. And we did just open up a call for provider participation in a community of practice around dehabilitation. So I would say this is the new big issue in our space is the ways in which dehabilitation is emerging as the place we put people when we can't figure out how to do competitive integrated employment. So this email just went out. If you're an APSI member, it's in your inbox. Please help us share that. We would like to get a good group of providers who are engaged in dehabilitation. The background to this project is that APSI has a guide for organizational leadership to frame internal conversations around the transition away from 14C models, which has had a lot of really good feedback. We want to redevelop that guide to address the specific organizational challenges with dehabilitation programs. And so we're looking for DAHAB providers who understand how DAHAB is structured within their organization to be able to engage in that conversation and provide feedback on how we can adjust that guide to be useful broadly. I think those are my updates. What did I not talk about that you wanted to talk about? Oh, Bill, yes. So in the omnibus that passed at the end of the calendar year, the Able Age Adjustment Act did pass. So yay, increased the age up to, I can't ever remember, is it 42 now? It's in the 40s. So that is really,
I think it's 46.
might be 46.
I want to guess. Yeah, I think it's 46.
So that is really good news. Also in the omnibus, I should mention, because Iowa is one of the leaders in using Money Follows the Person with employment in mind as a destination, that there was continued funding for Money Follows the Person. Unfortunately, not permanent funding, which we still are advocating for and hope to get someday. But at least we do have a little bit more time. It would just be great for Money Follows the Person to not every couple of years have to fight the battle of re-explaining why Money Follows the Person is such a vital program and should be part of a permanent funding authorization. So those are the two things that got across the finish line at the end of 2022. Okay, I see there's also a question about NEON in general. So this is, I think, year 4 of the NEON project. This is a federal Department of Labor, specifically ODEP, Office of Disability Employment Policy project. There are multiple branches of NEON and it gets quite confusing. So the piece that I really will speak to is where some of the national organizations are involved. So there are 5 of us. So it's APSI, ANCOR, the ARC of the United States, Source America, and Access, which is an interesting mix in and of itself. I cannot think of a time that those 5 entities partnered on a project ever in the history of anything. And interestingly, this partnership through ODEP started just about 6 months before the pandemic hit. So it actually created a really great forum to have some conversations cross organization around the needs of providers during the pandemic, which was really helpful for advocacy. APSI's work has been specific to 14C. The other organizations are working on different pieces and parts. I know Access in particular has been working on apprenticeships. And I would really encourage folks to take a look at some of the work that is coming out of their partnership. Really interesting stuff that I think is really innovative and needs to be lifted up. And I say that specifically because Access is an organization, for those who follow federal stuff. Access is one of the organizations that has historically been very pro 14C. So a great example of where you can have really good work happen in partnership with people that you may vehemently disagree with on one issue. And they're really taking a tremendous leadership role in the apprenticeship area. And I want to give them props to that while we continue to try to educate them on why they're wrong about 14C. I'll just say that because I believe it. Anywho, sorry, I took off my policy hat and put on my advocacy hat, and I'm going to switch back because that's not appropriate. Anywho, so yeah, that's the NEON project. Separately, you're probably hearing in the news that this year through NEON, multiple states were awarded funding. That is a separate part of the NEON project that the national organizations are not directly involved in. To be perfectly honest, and I've said this to the Department of Labor, so I'm not just complaining about them without their knowledge. I think there was a real missed opportunity in not bringing the national organizations and the state players together to have conversations about how we could coordinate work. But as often happens with federally funded initiatives, they don't think about the connections. They just kind of think in silos. And so I don't have a lot that I can share on the new state awards and what that will look like, because that was not something the national organizations were engaged in. So I think that's my updates.
Katrina shared that I'm the employment specialist at Access, and I started during the pandemic. Definitely a unique time to provide and supported employment services. Any other questions or comments for Julie right now? Julie, thank you so much for coming and sharing. Love to hear how you make things sound simple, which don't seem simple when you're trying to understand it. Sometimes by sorting through and reading, you just really do a fabulous job of making things relatable. So thank you. Really
thank
appreciate
you for all
it.
you guys are doing. So appreciate the Iowans in the world.
All right, Brooke. Do you need to be a co-host, Brooke?
I think towards the end, I would just like to remind people of where to register for Capital Chat and all that stuff. I have to do my plug. Good morning, everybody. I hope you're surviving our other winter storm we're having this year. Hopefully this is the last one. I'm taking down all of my Santa Claus decorations today in hopes that there will be no more snow. So those are all going back into the boxes. We are finishing up, if you can believe this, our 6th week of our legislative session. Sometimes it seems like they've been there for months and months, and other times it seems like they've just been moving really quickly. I'm sure everybody, has heard about the Educational Savings Plan or School Choice Plan that passed back in January. That seems like that was forever ago. The funding for the education has been signed. I believe the property taxes that they've been working on is now to the governor to be signed to fix some of the property taxes. They're just kind of going down on a checklist of the stuff that the governor wanted addressed in her speech that she did back in January. One of the big things that they're working on now that I'm sure folks have been hearing about is that the governor has asked legislators to reduce the 37 state agencies to 16. Part of that process has already begun a couple of years ago when they decided to move the Department of Human Services and the Department of Public Health into one agency. And so there's some of this 1,500 page bill. If you guys have looked at it, it is seriously 1,500. Is to just fix language to switch DHS and public health into HHS. But there are also some movement around with some other of our agencies that we support. I'm sure people know that the plan, if it passes, the book we have will move to Iowa Workforce Development. And then the Department of Aging will also become part of Health and Human Services. And then the Department of Human Rights also is too. And that's the one that we are hearing that people are concerned about because it has the Commission for Native Americans, for disabilities, for the deaf that are all under there, and what happens to those when they become the Department of Health and Human Services. So that one we still don't know a lot about. This week they have been having a bunch of public. They've divided the bill out by subcommittees, so they've had a few subcommittee meetings about this, going through sections of the bill and allowing people to allow public comment. Monday, they were addressing the Department for the Blind, and advocates spoke on that. The changes to that, what it does is that currently the director of the Department for the Blind is hired by the Commission for the Blind, and that department has been mostly led by folks that are blind. This does make it so the way it stands today in the current 1,500 pages is that the governor would get to appoint that. And so there's some controversy about that because it's historically been an agency that has been led by people who actually are blind. And so people were able to comment about that on Monday. Nothing has been passed. They haven't passed any subcommittee meetings yet. And then on Tuesday, or it might have been, Tuesday, the folks that are deaf and hard of hearing also provided some public comment, because what the bill does is it moves the School for the Deaf, the Iowa School for the Deaf, and the Iowa Braille and Sight Savings School from the Board of Regents to the Department of Education. With doing that, it actually says the current law says right now that you can't get rid of these two schools, for one, without there being a bunch of things that need to happen, and you can't combine the two. Well, this current way it's the 1,500 pages is written, it gets rid of that prohibition that then you could actually close these two schools, and it would give the governor or the Department of Education the authority to do that. And so alumni for the schools did speak, just gave some wonderful testimony on Tuesday that I believe that you can hear about why that shouldn't happen and why that they feel that the importance of those schools and their existence of them. So that's been a lot of work, and there's going to be more to come on that. And I'm sure there's state agencies here that can probably provide more of a highlight than what I could. We did have some good news. House File 243 passed out of the House, I believe, just yesterday. And it looks like it does have support in the Senate. And that requires insurance to pay for services with people with autism, regardless of age, and without limiting how much applied behavioral analysis they need. So that was a win. House File 252, that is one that we supported last year. It's actually Chad Engel's bill that didn't get past Florida, didn't get to floor debate last year, I believe, is where that landed. But this one provides scholarships to folks that have ID or DD to attend the REACH program, or the Northwestern College program has one similar, because it's a good transition education experience for students with ID, DD. It's also very, very expensive and cost prohibitive for folks that would want to go that. So this does allow for scholarships for that. That is on the debate calendar now in the House. And then there's also one that's House File 275, 275. I think it was House File 74. It's now 275. And this changes the lifetime limit of the ID waiver for home and community base, for home and vehicle modifications. It had a little bit of a 5,000 plus year lifetime limit on it for the ID waiver, but for the brain injury waiver, that had a yearly limit of $6,800 and some dollars. And so this just makes those so they're the same, so that the people under the ID waiver will now have that $6,800 a year they can spend to modify their homes. And that is ready to be debated on the House floor as well too. And that kind of, I know we don't have time to talk about this, and maybe this will be part of Leanne's update, but the Mathematica report that came out about changes that need to, what they recommended for changes that they see happening for the waivers. One of that big one is to make it so there's not different services and different gaps all over across the board, across all the waivers. And I think that's one recommendation that everybody supports. If you haven't seen that report, it's 100 pages long, but you could just look at the executive summary and see what some of those good recommendations are that could really help fix our waiver system in Iowa. But this bill right here, is getting to that. Let's see, Bill talked and Josie talked really good, had good information about the guardianship. And I'm probably over my time, Amy. I just have a couple of more quick things. There is a bill out there that's House File 188 that requires the MCOs to report the amount spending on HCBS versus institutions. This is only sponsored by the Democrats, so it might not have much movement, although I think we're hearing that I think some Republicans do support such a report on that, on getting that data. And probably just because it's, with the DOJ reporting as well too. There is Senate File 7 was introduced almost the first day by Representative Zahn, who's a Republican, that exempts income tax wages for direct support professionals. He puts this out there, I believe, every year, and it doesn't go anywhere. But this year, I think I'm saying this right. There's actually a companion bill on the House side that's also sponsored by a Republican, and that's House File 264. So maybe there's hope that could see some movement. If you guys aren't aware, we do have our first representative who actually has a physical disability, a permanent physical disability, who is in the House. Representative Josh Turek. He is out of Council Bluffs. He has come to a couple of our Capitol chats. He is in the minority side. But he has introduced a lot of really good legislation. The last day to do that was last Friday, which was February 10th. He knows to get any of these passed, he's going to have to get folks on the other side to follow him. He's on the Health and Human Services Committee and the Appropriations Committee, but also the Veterans Committee. And so, I think that would have a lot of bipartisan support. But he has something to make Election Day as a state holiday. He wants to reduce property tax for veterans with disabilities. He's got a bill out there. None of these have moved to committee yet, just so you know. But he does know the importance, again, to get that bipartisan support. He has one to raise the asset income limits for folks that are that do have disabilities, and not. I don't know if he quite understands it. We can do that through MEPD, but still he's got some really, it looks like there's a list of about 18 bills. So he is a freshman there. He's really been busy. So I do if you're up at the Capitol or doing any advocacy, ask to meet him, because he's actually, that now the House actually had to be accessible because you couldn't get into the House floor because there was not a ramp. And so now, he's going to be a great role model for people as they come to the Capitol and do some of their advocacy work. What else? I think I'll just do a shout out to our, if you're not getting our weekly emails that talk about this, it's not moving. And maybe I don't have access to, my computer's freezing out. But we do send out this information every week, and what we call our This Week at the Capitol. It usually comes out Monday morning, and like I said, things are just moving really quickly, because even the stuff that was in the one that came out Monday, things have moved and changed on that. So do sign up for that. Let me see if I can share my screen. For now, it's not freezing up. So here, Hopefully you're looking at that. So this is just our website and it's got the last 5 weeks of our weekly capital. It just gives a highlight of what's been going on. If you're not getting these in your email box, you can sign up here for our Join Your DD network. And then also I wanted to show you where to sign up for our capital chat. And so we do these on the usually the last Friday of the month, and it's a virtual meeting that people can come and learn, you know, what's happened this past month, and then ask questions. If like, you know, we've had Bill actually last year, I believe it was Bill, you came and talked about the guardianship bill and provided that same, and we might ask you to do that again this year because folks get really confused about those guardianship bills and whether or not to be for or against it, because it has, you know, they're confused. It's law, it's confusing. So we might have you come talk about that, but we usually have guest speakers. I believe we're going to go through the Mathematica report a little bit on this one on Friday with Lisa Cook from Medicaid. So do sign up for that. Hopefully you can see where to register for that. Okay, I'll take a breath now and see if anybody has any questions for me that I can answer.
I
Hey,
just
Brooke, this
wanted-
is,
Oh, go ahead. Kate.
I'm sorry. Do you have any information on the bill that is the one that reduces or that causes eligibility checks for like food stamps and stuff? It used to be HR 3, I think. I don't think it is anymore.
The SNAP bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a committee meeting yesterday about it on the Senate side. We haven't put that in our capital chat, but it did pass the subcommittee yesterday. Even though there was probably an hour worth of public comment on why people, so it's House File 3, and then it's Senate Study Bill 1105.
Okay.
And the Senate Study Bill, I think, was even a little bit more scarier than the House file, but both, in my opinion, aren't good bills.
Yeah, I just thought that one was, in terms of the impact on the people with disabilities in our world, you know, it's a little bit convoluted, but still big.
Yep. And
So
thanks for
I
bringing
thought,
it.
anyway, I thought that one
I think-
needs to be kept on the radar. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that. We have made public comment against both bills. And maybe it's just because I'm trying to forget that they exist that I didn't mention it in my overview, because I'm really worried they're both going to pass because there's been so much public comment against it and they're still moving. So it's, you know, but I'm going to be optimistic. I'm not going to
I'm
be
with
Debbie
ya.
Downer
I'm
too
with ya.
early, but yeah, I'm concerned about
I
those
get
two
it.
families. So thanks for bringing that up.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to put an endorsement in for the capital chats because they're amazing and they're just really, really worthwhile and they're recorded as well, aren't they, Brooke? If I was thinking
They are recorded, and we actually, if you sign up for our network, and if you can't make it a Friday, then we actually will email it out on Monday so you can listen to it if you prefer to do it that way too. And then we also, I forgot to mention, we do a snapshot too, where Amy, and if you haven't met Carlin yet, but we have a new public policy manager that started right before Christmas. They do a video. So basically they kind of go over the email that's going to get sent out, but they do it in a video. So if people would rather hear about it than read another email on a Monday morning at 7:30, then they can just listen to the video. And they're kind of comedy too. They put a little bit of comedy in it too. Sometime we'll have to release the bloopers that they do. They probably wouldn't like that, but
they're fabulous. So I just encourage folks to access it. And the council is such a great support. If you're not as familiar, if you have questions about how to do things, or maybe you haven't been very engaged in going to the Capitol and talking to folks, or going to community events where you're not quite sure how to approach sharing what you want and your perspective with folks, there's lots of great support through the council. So I encourage you to connect with them because they'll help you navigate it. Any other questions or comments for Brooke? Thank you so much, Brooke. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Bill and Josie. Great policy updates. All right, I'm going to take away the screen again for just a second. All right, so sorry. The next thing on our agenda is I reached out, I had mentioned earlier, I reached out to Derek Willis with the University of Iowa and Brian Dennis with Iowa Workforce Development to see if they would talk with us about keeping diversity, equity, and inclusion. Really, you know, I read something recently that talked about this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And we have so much work to do. I feel like we've done a good job of talking about things, but I don't know, at least for me personally, I don't know that I've done a great job about actually doing much about it. And I came across this just very recently in an email that just highlighted some data for students with disabilities and disciplinary removals. And we'll share this with you as well. And we're going to try to see if we can get some more information about Iowa's specific statistics. But, you know, you look at this and it's so disturbing. And you see the disparity. And this is just, I think, one very, very small drop in the bucket of the kind of disparity that's out there. And so part of my hope is that we begin to integrate diversity, equity, inclusion work in everything that we do, and try to bring that lens, because it's really easy to think that we are making progress, but I don't know that we always know if we really are. So I'm going to turn it over to Derek and Brian. And if you need to be co-hosts, Jess can make you co-host. And if you need us to do any breakout rooms, I know this is a very different dynamic doing all of this virtually. And so you please just let us know what you need. And I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Coalition, and what a wonderful group. It's always a pleasure to be before you. And Brian and I, we had one discussion, and the one thing that we wanted today was to have more of a discussion. And so there's a couple of things that we want to do. One was just kind of offer some opening remarks from both of us. Two was to just kind of discuss some of the things that we've done in our spaces to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then three, kind of talk about action and what could that look like? What should it look like? And what are some of the things that we possibly could do as a coalition to begin to address these things? And so that's kind of what we frame, but again, we want this to be more of a discussion than a presentation. You know, and over the last few years, based on a lot of things that we've seen in society and things that have happened, you know, one of the things that I've come to learn in this process, and I began this journey, and I was looking at the time, it was 23, I was asked to be the director of the Office of Multicultural Affairs for the state of Missouri's Department of Mental Health in 2000, and began to start this journey, as Amy said, around diversity, equity, inclusion, and just dive into just what is it that we can do in order to create equity within our systems, our services, our supports, and so I've learned a lot over the time. But you know, I have to say that most recently, you know, has been some of the most profound lessons that that's not written in textbooks. It's more around just looking at behaviors and experiencing discussions. And one of the things that I learned, and I developed this speaking series called Moving from Safe Spaces to Brave Spaces because of my experiences, that I don't think that we are equipped in many arenas to have discussions related to this. I don't think that we're prepared to have these discussions. And so oftentimes, and I sat in on, at the hospital, I sat in on these listening sessions where our hospital administrators put together these affinity groups, and we listened to people, just gave them the floor to just talk and to talk about how they felt. And I was just blown away by the things that I heard, the experiences that people are dealing with on a daily basis in their work environments, in their homes, in their communities. And it just led me to believe that we have got to get better at having these discussions. And so I'm grateful that Amy brings this to the table. I'm grateful that Amy never forgets about this. And I'm grateful for you all to be willing to just have this discussion and to just listen to Brian and I talk a little bit about some of our experiences here. I don't know if you watch the news. I have to unplug from the news every now and then, but this morning I was just flipping through and I saw the sentencing of the young man in Buffalo who went to the grocery store specifically to just kill people because they were Black, and it just pulled, from my heartstring, man, that we still live in a time, and I've been around for, as you can see, all the gray. I've been here since 1962, man, and I'm from the South, small town, where you cross the tracks and you find the Blacks, and grew up in segregated schools and everything, but I've never felt the way I feel now in terms of what is happening in society related to these issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I also saw where they said that there's 36 states that now have legislation that is trying to ban the way that we educate people on Black history, and over 139 pieces of legislation that are currently in states being deliberated now related to this. It's just so, I don't think that I've ever been in a time where I felt like the environment as it relates to equity, civil rights, diversity has ever been so intense. And I think that that's why I feel like, and I feel propelled to, have these discussions and be willing to invest time into what we do as we move forward to make sure that as we are looking at and defining what equity is, because I think we've used these terms a lot, cultural competency. I don't believe that there's ever such a thing as cultural competency. I think we're always going to be learning how to be responsive to what society presents to us. But I think that, we have to be resilient in this situation and continue to have these dialogues and continue to have these opportunities to come together and to discuss, what's happening in these environments, and looking at the data, as Amy said, the data speaks to you. And I think, you can look at any situation, whether it's housing, whether it's employment, whether it's incarceration, whether it's education, rates of education, graduation rates, dropout rates, anything, you can see that there's disparities in what happens between people. And a lot of it is based on, the diversity. And so I'm glad that you guys are willing to have this discussion. I'm glad that we're having this conversation. And I ask Amy, this has to be something that you put on the agenda on every meeting that you have. It's just not a one and done type thing, and it's only through these types of environments and conversations that we're going to bring about a change. And so I'm gonna stop there, ask Brian to add some before we move forward and everything.
Well, first off, Derek, thank you for your opening remarks. Amy, thank you for inviting us in. My name is Brian Dennis. Officially, I am the Bureau Chief of Disability Services with Iowa Workforce Development. But more importantly for this discussion, I am a 47-year-old Black man. And so that's going to fuel a lot of my comments today. Before I get started, I always have to find some commonality in the room. So Bill, number one, I'm usually one that they say talks too much. So thank you for taking that bullet today. I appreciate that. And for Julie Christensen, I grew up in Georgia. So I again feel the Mason-Dixon line love when I look outside and see it's snowing. Okay. Yeah, you didn't have to run to roots though. I know where I'm at. Okay. I am always aware of where I'm at, which bleeds into a lot of what we're talking about when we talk about issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, because sometimes people get a little tired of talking about this. And they go, well, we talked about it then, we talked about it now, it's in the news, we have to go to training at work. And there is some level of burnout. But just as I said to Julie, I'm fully aware that as a native Georgian, when I live in a state that it snows more often than not, I'm aware of where I'm at. Understand that for persons of color, and yes, we're doing this, and Black History Month, person of color, why this is important that as a person of color, as a Black person, and I just realized my mic was up. Sorry about that if no one heard me. As a person of color, as an African-American individual, a person who identifies as Black, there's lots of lexicon we can use. You're always aware of where you're at. So it sometimes may feel like this is getting wedged into spaces that maybe it does or doesn't belong. If you unpack it that way, understand that the reason that we're constantly bringing this up is for a large segment of our community. For everyone in our world, remember, these are things that Derek, myself, and so many others, we're always aware of where we're at. And if you just take a minute and process what that means, to always need to be aware of where you're at. How that influences everything that you do. Okay, so I am the proud son of an educator. My mom was a special education teacher. She also did something very brave in the civil rights movement. And the thing she did was so brave, she got a job. But she got a job as the first African-American at a local department store. That was her bravery in the civil rights. As a community that talks about employment is, she only got a job. Her and her best friend went and got a job at a local department store because they were not only, they were the first, they were going to be, and forgive me, we have definitely progressed, I hope, as a country. They're going to be the makeup girls. That's what they were told their jobs were. That's what their job was, the makeup girls. They worked at a counter doing makeup, but they had to be escorted by police because they were the first two Black people to work at this company and successfully being Black women. All right. So my full name is Brian Stephen Dennis, and then we'll get to kind of packing a little bit more. So I also teach at Drake, and I usually during my intro, I point out now kind of my name, because my name is Brian Stephen Dennis, and I always say, and this is true, I always point out how I got my first name, Brian, which was my mom being a public school teacher, special education teacher. When she found out she was pregnant, after going to 5 different doctors to confirm she was pregnant, she was 33 and had convinced herself she was never having kids. So it took 5 docs to confirm to her. And Amy, real quick, the 5th one goes, before you find a 6th one, in a few months you are giving birth. So do what you want. So, you know, at some point your body's going to tell you what's going to happen. All right. So when her and my father were talking, she goes, I really want to name him after my favorite student. And my dad's, okay, so what's your student's name? She goes, Shane. And my dad, again, this is what I heard from my parents. My dad quickly goes, no Black kids are named Shane. We're not doing that. So he goes, well, what's your second favorite student's first name? And she goes, Brian. That I can co-sign. All right. So, but growing up was named Brian Stephen Dennis. I think Stephen came from, they just thought it sounded good, was the other part of the story, which I don't typically share until I feel we're in a space that it is a safe place to have this, which is the other side of the story. The other side of the story is, again, my mom's a public school teacher, an educator, taught about her background and her childhood. But her thought process was, I want my kid to one day, again, do something really brave in this country and have a job. And so she did a place back then where everybody did the paper applications. She wanted, when my application went across to someone's desk, be it for a job, for college, for anything, where maybe I'm being evaluated sight unseen. When they read my name, they would assume I'm white. They'll make that assumption. And I can tell you still today, I have conversations on the phone, and when people meet me, they go, "Oh, you're Brian." I have, and I'm not going to mention any specific example, but I still, again, Bureau Chief of Disability Services sounds really important. I've had more than a few meetings where I've shown up and I've been asked, "Are you lost?" No, I'm counting the badge. See, I'm supposed to be, I'm on the agenda. Okay, hey, I'm a funny black guy in the wheelchair. Like, people like me. Let me in. And that brings it kind of where I close this before we open this up is that last piece I talked about. So if you've never met me in person, I navigate the world using a wheelchair for the past 8 or so years. After I had surgery and was back home, one of my really good friends came over and sees me and go, "Brian, I didn't know you had a BMW." I'm like, I have a Ford. At the time I had a Ford. I have a Dodge now. I had a Ford. And they go, no, you're black man wheelchair. And that was the most mainstreaming integrative moment ever, is that my friends who know I always have something smart to say, hit me with it back. And I go, "Thank you." This has been the most normalizing moment of my new experience. But then the other part of it, back to lesson that we learn in our households, is again, as a parent teaching her son to be prepared for the world in Bible Belt South Georgia, to the current climate we live in, what she goes, "When you leave this house, if you want to be successful, you need to know one important rule." And I asked her what it was, and she goes, "You need to know how to make white people happy." Flat out. More than what you can do, what you know, who you know. Can you step into a space that you are a Southern expression, the raisin in the pound cake? And can you make white people happy? And a lot of us here talk about human development, those lessons we learn. That's something that is so ingrained in my personality that it always bleeds forward. And that is not to say I walk into things inauthentic, but back to my first beginning, when I say you're always aware of where you're at, I'm always aware of where I'm at. And I think Derek and many others can probably co-sign some of those lessons. So with the time we have remaining, Amy, tell us when we start running short. We just want to just throw out a few things with folks. Now, I can't hush. Well, I can't hush. That's just the end of that. But I can't hush without just giving you folks just a few stats of why this is important, specifically in this space that we're in right now. So I looked up a few things preparing for today. Here's just a couple quick statistics. So within the state of Iowa, okay, African Americans, folks identify as Black, we're about 4% of Iowa's population. All right. Of that 4%, half of that population lives literally in the cities of Des Moines, Waterloo, Cedar Rapids, and Davenport. Now, one more stat before I get to a disability stat, which is of that half of all African Americans live in those 4 cities, 40% of that percentage live in Des Moines and Waterloo. So you, depending on where you're at, you may look around your spaces and go, well, where's the diversity? Because in Iowa, where we are 90%-ish white, there are concentrations, but those concentrations have lots of different pieces. But the last part of it is this, is because obviously we know the group we're part of, and we speak about persons with disabilities. Within the state of Iowa, African Americans encounter disability the second highest rate in our state, the second highest rate. The only group that outpaces us are Native American or indigenous peoples. All right. So when you're looking at who you serve, if you're not serving many persons of color, if you're not serving many African Americans or indigenous peoples, you're probably missing the diversity in your community. So all of your spaces should be diverse just by when we look at our customer, the folks that we serve, regardless of what name is on our business cards. If you're going to talk about disability inclusion, especially in the state of Iowa, you have to talk about race and ethnicity inclusion as well, because if not, you're just missing the folks that are most likely being affected by experiencing life with a disability.
And just to piggyback on that, and I think a lot of you have heard me, if you've heard me present, you've heard me talk about the diversity within diversity, right? And so as Brian has said, African Americans, but you all for me, like, for example, in Iowa City, I believe that there's 4 different or 5 different sets of people, let's just say Black and Indigenous. There's Somalis, there's people from the Republic of Congo, there's African Americans who were born and raised in Iowa City. There's African Americans like me who come to Iowa City for a job at the university, and we kind of come and we kind of go. And the way we navigate spaces in this same little community is all different, and all related to the environments, the churches that we attend, the foods that we eat, the events that we participate in. And so there's diversity within that diversity. And so it really speaks to the fact that if we're really going to be able to begin to make a difference in the lives of individuals in our communities, we have to engage. I mean, we have to, and I forgot about the other group that is in Iowa City specifically, is the people who have, I call them, who have migrated from Chicago, who have this kind of field of dreams concept of they want a better life. And those individuals, when they come here, they're not trying to get engaged in community. They just want to get their kids out of the city, out of these dangerous environments. They want to work hard. They don't want to meet anybody here because their space is back in, and their entertainment is back in Chicago. They go there, they come back, they come here to work and put their heads down and raise their kids and create a safe environment for the kids. They're not trying to be a part of a community. And so you have all of these dynamics that are taking place within these communities and within these groups of diverse people that makes it even more complex, which speaks to the fact that if we are ever going to do anything, we have got to begin to establish some engagement strategies. We've got to go where those people are. We got to establish and build relationships, trusted relationships with those groups. And we can't be the ones that are in the front of the table, leading these discussions. It has to be through them, by them, and we have to be there, willing to listen and to learn from those experiences. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what happens in some of those communities. And, I think the biggest myth is that just because you're a person of color, you should know how to address these issues. And that's not the case and stuff. One of the things, and I'll just speak, and then Brian, you can jump in. One of the things that we've done intentionally at the USAID is to hire people from diverse backgrounds. And even though, and you'll hear people say that, well, I can't find in the positions that I have that maybe they're not qualified for. I have Judy Worth here is on this Zoom call that was a strong advocate for a individual, and you guys have probably seen him, Ed Asbeck. And he doesn't have a degree. He is one of the smartest individuals that we have, and we grow and we learn from his experiences every day. But if you looked at these traditional ways of engagement and employment, he would not fit in that box. And Julie tried, and but it was through our persistence and our saying, why not? What is it that we can do? How can we make this happen? That we were able to employ Ed. And I tell you, just his being in the space that he's in helps us grow and learn each day. I have Julia Ganda, who's from the Republic of Congo, who came through us through our disability and diversity fellowship that we created. And she graduated through that fellowship, a year-long fellowship, and we created a position for her, and she still works for us for Compass. I just hired a pastor from an immigrant community here in Iowa City, Dayreen, And she helps us now be that person that connects us to recent immigrants on the southeast side of Iowa City that now gives us access to what are the things that they're dealing with. And she's a mother with a child with a disability. She has access to families who would never probably ever walk into CDD. And so, but we don't ask them to come here, we go to them, you know. And so how do you begin these engagement strategies so that you begin to better your understanding of what's happening in these communities that are in Iowa? And Brian?
Thank you, Derek. So a lot of what you heard from Derek is the idea of engagement. And again, this is a group that a lot of what we say, if you reframe with a different lenses, probably sounds somewhat familiar. With the idea that if you want to increase your engagement, diversity, and your retention piece, it can't be, hey, we're open 8 to 5, come on in. Because if being open 8 to 5 really worked, then there would be no barriers, right? And that's what makes a lot of what we're talking about hard, because sometimes the barrier is invisible, but not really. It's invisible and you really don't look for it, right? Oh, I had to move a little something on my desk. There it is. There's the barrier. But a lot of it, what it is the ability to engage with other communities. So whether that is a community of color, that's community that are new Americans, communities of poverty, folks coming out of corrections, it is that understanding where a lot of those pockets of engagement are. So it basically comes down, and we're going to talk more about this, but it comes down to trust, and understand that when you are a marginalized community, trust is where you start. Goes back to, I'm always aware of where I'm at. So Derek and I, when we first met, come on, everybody loves Brian, right? But I felt the need to at least establish some level of connection with Derek, because there's not a lot of people that look like me that does this type of work. There really aren't. So, hey, Derek, I put up with Derek's jokes and he puts up with mine and we get along, okay? But if you're trying to make those increased connections, do you know where those pockets, where those populations really are? So he mentioned being intentional in a lot of your hiring work, as well as being intentional in a lot of your hiring work. Can you build those seeds of trust? Do you have a footprint in the faith-based community, which is a big part for a lot of marginalized communities, especially for African-American and Latinx communities? Do you know community centers or individuals get together? Do you know who the leaders of your communities are? If you already don't have a touch point, you can't, again, just flip the switch again. Hey, trust us, we're nice, if it was only that easy. But if you can find that champion, and you'll probably hear this a lot during our time, if you can begin to find that champion, that's where you begin to make some movement. And that is part of being very, very intentional. You can never set a goal of, I want to meet every African-American in my community and convince them that we are trustworthy human beings. That will not happen. However, if you understand who a leader is in your community, outreach to that individual, because that can be your champion. And start off with, we talked before about cultural competency. I'm not a big fan of that, because number one, it makes it sound like, hey, once we hit a certain score on the assessment, we're good. And that's not real, because there's never going to be a period on the sentence. There's always going to be a comma, because as soon as you do something well, there's something else to focus your efforts on, right? But really more the idea of cultural humility. And the difference between the two is this. Cultural competency is basically you going, hey, whatever community that you want to connect with, tell us about who you are. And tell us what books to read, what trainings to go to, and who we should be friends with. And then it's all good. Now, those things are still important, the self-education, but that's still putting the work and the onus on the community that's already not being served. And you see kind of the inequity of that. Versus cultural humility is, before you even do that, look at yourself. Okay, kind of like a mirror. All right. Before we go to someone else, let's go, hey, make us do our jobs better and tell us what we're doing, basically solve our problem for us, is not only understand that there is a problem, there is an imbalance, there is an inequity, there is a gap, however you want to frame it, and looking at yourselves and figuring out, why is it there? Why is it there? A lot of us in this room like to use the term counselor as who we are. Really quick, nickel psychology is but you can solve a problem, got to admit that there is one. So admit that there is one. No value judgment. We're not going to kick you off the island, but have those internal conversations. And again, be intentional. Look at that engagement. Find that champion. Do things to develop that trust both internally and externally. Intentional hiring is great, but if you also, my one pause I give, and Derek gave phenomenal examples, is that if your idea of beginning your equity inclusion is to go out and hire a person of color, hire a person from a marginalized community, and your organization is not a safe space, you are not going to retain them. And if anything, you've now done additional damage, because they're going to go back to their community, as they should, and go, that was an unsafe environment. I'm not good there. And guess what? If you're not good, then you're paid to be there. Let's say you're a service provider. Well, why would I ever send my kid there? Why would I send my family member there? Why would I go there? So think about those things, that it's not just jumping. That's what we do this in our world all the time. We jump to fixing a problem before we talk about it, right? I'll just fix it. I know I just go hire 3 Black people, because that's the stat Brian gave. So to get to that 4%, I need 3 people. And I got these 3 people on staff, we're good, right? And by the way, and this is the thing I used to say when I do these solo, I'm saying for me and Derek now, don't take this because you're hearing from 2 peoples and go, well, Brian and Derek had said, and then that takes care of it. Well, the 2 Black guys said we should do this. No, we're just trying to give you perspective from our point of view. But again, first start, look internally from that culture of humility. Where do we see some gaps? Where do we see there's work to be done? Again, before you fix someone else's houses, kind of fix your own. Then reach out to those communities and look at finding that champion. And again, invite them in, ask them for help, but also do a lot of the work on your, not saying on your own, like without any support, but take the onus to let's do some work ourselves. The last thing before I turn it back over to Derek is this. And this is a mistake I see a lot of organizations made, both for-profit and nonprofit, is when you have those crucial conversations about this work and you ask, well, who's really kind of spearheading it? And let's say they have 7 goals that fall underneath that diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, accountability, accessibility umbrella. And every person is really the primary lead for that is the person that has DEI diversity in their job title. That's who it is. Well, we've got Janet for that. Okay. Well, who else works besides Janet? Well, Janet's our DEI officer. Okay. Well, does Janet have a staff? Does Janet have a committee? Does Janet have any power? Well, for Janet to do it, then she got to go to the vice president. Okay. And does the vice president go to any of Janet's committee meetings? Well, no. But how do you know? Well, Janet made this great 1-pager. We got the best flyer ever. Okay, so you spent the money on the flyer. How much time you spent talking to people who the flyer is supposed to reach out to? Well, which is really great marketing. And these colors really represent, and it is February, right? So we put all the pictures on our video board, and it's all from like Wakanda Forever, right? That's the movie, right? So we got screenshots. And we paid for tickets. And we donate a little money this month to this cause. And then it's March 1st. Well, we did that. We'll see again in the next 28 days, by the way. You see what I'm saying? Like, you can't, if you have budget, I'm trying to use better language. A communities who are underrepresented, who are underconnected, honestly, they and we have a really good nose for when you're not really being authentic, right? Because a lot of times the experience you've had is most people being inauthentic. And right, wrong, and indifferent, you're going to battle the inauthenticity that others have represented. So if you yourself don't come from an authentic place, we're already going to be looked at kind of like, oh, no, this might be a trick. You've just made it worse. You really have. You've just compounded the issue that you began with. So that was a long-winded way before I, again, say, hey, we're going to turn back over to Derek, is you have to be authentic in what you do. And the first thing that you do for authenticity is look and evaluate yourselves.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments, Brian, and right on point. So with I know we have just a little bit more time, and I just want to offer a few things in terms of what I would say, is a way to approach this. All of us, work for different organizations, We have the general sense of responsibilities that are specific to us and our jobs and our organizations. Brian mentioned a key word is the champions. We have to figure out, who are those key people in those organizations? What is the structure within those organizations that you can approach to begin to have this dialogue? Because it starts with that. Amy and I, we're big fans of the collective impact model, and it really is about this environment where we learn together. How do we create this opportunity that we learn together? And that's what I see as I see Coalition is this. It's an environment where we can begin to start having this dialogue and learning how to make sure that we keep this at the forefront, but not also that it gets stuck in this space where we just have conversations about it. How do we begin to start formulating action items that really advance and make an impact on the outcomes that we see every day and the things that we experience? So how do you create this common agenda? How do you understand from a measurement perspective when you have made gains, when you have things that you can celebrate and accomplish and value? How do you create opportunities for individuals to get engaged in activities for people to participate in the services and the supports and the things that we offer? Are we asking the question every time that we develop something? I know that we've created a culture here at the UCED where everybody looks at it from this equity lens, and it's not because of me, it's because of the people that I work with and the people who have embraced the concept and the culture that we've created, that they say, as I'm doing this work, are we leaving anybody out? How are we engaging? How are we connecting? We have our Youth Leadership Academy, we have our Summer Transportation Institute, we have our Diversity and Disability Fellows. I'm going to bring a young person in from Tanzania. Again, this will be the third round that I'm doing that's going to spend a whole month with us. Those types of activities, it has an intentional lens to it. How are we doing this outreach and making sure that everything that we do, opportunities that we provide, creates opportunities for everybody. It's continuous communication, it's relationship building, it's engagement like we talked about. And then it's also, it has to have some structure when it, what they call that backbone. And it doesn't have to be an organization. It could be a coalition like this that is that backbone, but it is that collective impact that we really have to begin to make it a priority. Identify time and space for you to begin to dialogue. Through that dialogue, begin to identify things that we can do together collectively that makes an impact. Give responsibilities and ask people to go back to their organizations and ask these questions, or even be that spokesperson that begins to investigate in that organization. What are they doing? What can they do? How can they do it better? But it has to start somewhere. I believe in that collective impact, and I think that we have an opportunity here. But it takes time. It's a journey. It gets messy. It's lots of stops and turns, and sometimes you feel like you're not getting anywhere, but you have to be resilient in those situations. But again, it has to begin somewhere, and a lot of it starts with these types of conversations and stuff. And I'll stop there, open it up. Brian, if you have other thoughts as well, love to hear from you guys and see how this conversation resonated with you as well. So.
Absolutely. I think that's the best thing to use with our time now, is to turn over for questions, comments, thoughts. So as a group, where you at?
I'll go. You had me kind of thinking about how are we, and Money Falls a person. I look at my, I report on the diversity, am I working with Caucasian, African American, Native American? I'm looking at it and I'm remembering to myself, I'm putting more Caucasian on our, reporting. So where are we missing that gap? So I need to kind of reflect a little bit more and see on that if I need to talk with our transition team a little bit more about that. So I don't know. You guys had those stories that you guys had shared kind of resonated with what I do and what the work, and yeah, there's a lot to be done. I don't know. I think I messaged Judy and I was like, man, you guys ignited something under me today. So just thank you for saying what you guys had.
I appreciate you saying that, and that's what we hope that these discussions do. I mean, again, we don't have the answers, but we hope it stimulates activity and a response. And just for you to even think about, am I doing all that I can to reach out to all people is just the beginning part of it. And then asking the question, why aren't more people coming to me? And it's not only people of color, it's people from diverse backgrounds. It's not only racial, it's all people. But making sure that as we look at the people that we're serving, are we missing people? And what is it that we can do to engage and to bring people in? Yeah. I see Lynn has her hand up.
Can I just jump in one thing that Tyler said, just for the benefit of the group? Just to also understand is to add, again, diverse within diversity. So because this is a group that specifically talks about disability so often, understand that for a lot of individuals, their disability can be used as a barrier for lots of populations, but especially for persons of color, a lot of times that diagnosis of a disability has been used to withhold things from them. So it has definitely been used more as an explicit punishment. Okay, so Amy, you pointed out with the kids with the removal. I don't even remember that, but when I was in your practicum class, I literally pulled up a thing of that data, and I hate to say it back in it was too long ago, I'm going to mention. I was like worse than the nation. So hopefully we've done some movement there. I was really, really bad there. But just understand that for a lot of it, regardless of even the type of disability we're talking about, for persons of color, many times once they get that diagnosis, their journey becomes even harder versus for others, for white individuals, once you have that the door's opened. And they got all these additional services and supports for a person of color. Many times it's the exact opposite response. So Tyler, when you're wondering why you're not serving people, because again, that's that additional barrier that you have to do some work on to overcome it. So just to throw that out there for folks to think about as they're trying to come up with some strategies.
Yeah, I had even thought about that, the education, and I know individuals, families, even with MFP, the folks that are going back to live with their families are, have maybe don't know about the HCBS settings a little bit more. So offering those as more of a conversation into it. So I think a lot more are open to taking them back into their house, or we're going to do the footwork and we're going to help our family. And it's just like you said, it's a cultural thing. So
it is. We come from a culture, particularly Black people. I can't speak for all cultures, but we take care of ourselves, and we believe that nobody else can take care of our kids the way that we can. And so we're not trusting a lot of systems. And again, people who have access some systems felt like that they have not been treated well, and so they're not going to come back, and they're not going to enroll, and they're not going to get engaged because they don't believe that their systems are set up for them and stuff. And so,
and if you look at the representative of the system, do those representatives look like their family? That is a very upfront, in your face barrier there that folks are going to be aware of.
Hey Brian, this is Brana. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hey Brana.
Hey, first off, thanks for both of you presenting today, because it's something that can make people feel uncomfortable, but it's a conversation that we need to have. For me, one of the questions I had, and it's right off of what you just said, Brian, is that I am 62-year-old white woman who's lived a privileged life, and even though I would like to say that I'm not racist, we are all racist. And so I would say that as well. I'm not somebody that somebody is going to identify with, as you said, Brian. What I have seen in the individuals that I have worked with is that we also run into, if I work and make too much money, I may lose some of my benefits that I rely on, that I do have. And if I go to certain agencies, there's nobody there that's going to understand me because they don't look like me, they don't live my life, they don't live in my community, all of those kind of things. How do we start the conversation in a way that I'm not a white person going in trying to solve everybody's problem when I have no clue as to what the problems are?
I think this number one. Oh, I'm sorry, Brian. I feel like I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, does that make sense what I'm asking? Because I think that's part of what stops people,
Mhm.
you know? And I know for myself, you know, I'm always trying to learn and evolve, and I take inventory of myself all the time. But if I go into somebody's home to meet them for the first time, they're going to see me as the white privileged person
So,
because okay. And
Mhm.
so automatically there becomes a barrier of who is, you know, this person coming into my home, and they're going to tell me of these services, and it's coming from somebody that I don't trust.
Right. So I have two quick thoughts, and Derek and anyone else that wants to jump in. But here are my two quick thoughts. Number one is when you're engaging with the populace, especially a populace that you do not represent,
Mhm.
don't tell people what you can do. Ask them what they need.
Right.
Flat out, because that puts down your expertise thing of, hey, I know you better, you know your circle. Here's what we're gonna do. No. What do you need? And not
Right.
just say it. And again, this the authenticity button. And authenticity takes a while to convey, and more importantly, to be received. So this isn't a matter of, oh, I said the words that Brian said, it didn't work. Give it a minute. Okay. But start off with, what do you need? How can I help your family? Well, you need to make your family go. All right. And they may go, but we're concerned about this thing we heard. And that's the other thing. But when you're minority members, you trust the people to represent your community, even if unfortunately that information is either incorrect or has been based on a very specific bad influence. But what we heard that this happened to a person in our community, and I get it, even myself being a member of a minority community, well, that typically will not happen, but it happened to someone that they know and they trust. They're going to hold on to that. Give it a minute, give it time. It'll take a minute. The other piece that you can begin to do with that, and I just lost my thought, with some humility, is the idea of, shoot, I just lost it too much. It'll come back to me. That's my first thought, is again, start off with what you can do. I mean, ask them what they need versus starting out with what you can do. Oh, and then the other piece of it is this. We tend to pathologize the idea of resistance. Well, understand that resistance for a lot of folks means safety. So if I keep you at arm's length, if I push against a lot of what you're saying again, because you act like you know my life more, then again, a lot of this is implied message, implicit message we're sending instead of things we're saying out there. Understand that person who may come with, hopefully not literally, but maybe figuratively with their fists up to keep themselves safe, that is what it is doing. It is their way of keeping each other safe and keeping their family safe. But all the time we hear that and we jump to resistance. And that's point 3 that plays out for that is, be careful in taking files too literally. Okay, someone has a history of being resistant, difficult, unmotivated. That's a lot of coded language too. They're different. We didn't know what to do.
Right.
You have to be very careful. So again, that was my, unfortunately, 3 things instead of 2, but those are my real quick thoughts. So Derek or anyone else?
Just real quick, I want to say that you know, Maya Angelou said it so beautifully. She said, people will forget your name, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And so creating these environments where people feel comfortable and feel, because there's never going to be enough professionals in our industry that we can serve every African American that comes to the door, every Asian that comes to the door, every person that's transgender that comes to the door can see that person. I mean, it doesn't have, we have to create this environment and this culture that is responsive to everybody who walks in that door. But it starts with, how do you treat people and how do you make people feel? And not be so caught up on the fact that I'm a white person coming in this and they don't trust me. Trust is earned. And
Right.
built. And so creating that space that allows that opportunity to be built is what's needed. So.
I think the other thing is that, you know, none of us like to be told that people are going to do things for us and then it's not carried through. And I think from outside looking in, I think there's been so much of that it's justified. You know, but I guess I don't go in thinking that people don't trust me, but I have to think that am I being looked at as just another white woman coming in to try to fix everybody else's problems that I don't have a clue about. You know, and then the other question I did have was, you know, due to cultural difference, whether it's African American community or what minority group it is, there is some resistance to services for people with disabilities. And part of it, I know is a cultural thing as well. How do we begin to break through some of those barriers that just exist?
Could you ask that question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was basically that you know, a lot of different cultures and you know, races and ethnicities, they have different views on people with disabilities.
Absolutely.
And so how do we break through some of those barriers that you know, that are just generationally believed that this is the way that we treat those individuals?
Yeah, I think, again, like, I think it starts with just engagement. And that engagement gives you the opportunity to learn from their beliefs, to understand their beliefs, and then offer things that could be helpful for them. But it starts with engagement and
engagement and time and examples. I mean, because oftentimes if I just go, we're not going to do that. Doesn't carry a lot of weight as that. Hey, we've shown that we can do. We've shown that we can do that. We've shown that we are. And you're not just in there. And I'm sorry, Dad, I feel like I cut you off. You're not just in there to recruit people so you can get a reimbursement.
Yeah.
That you actually have a genuine interest in the community that you are trying to commit to. So do you do community events? Does your organization support volunteering, helping out with things? So again, you have a visibility other than being someone that maybe shows up when someone's in the hospital or goes to their house with the company car with a big file. You have them sign this paper and then we move them out to move into an ACBS site, or things that seem like you're taking people from the community versus being a part of community. All right. All those things, even best laid plans, can be interpreted as a negative because you don't have that trust in the community. So those other things beside the service delivery can begin to change some of those viewpoints.
Exactly. Real quick, I'll just tell you a little story about this organization I worked with in Kansas City. It's called Mattie Rose, and they had worked with a lot of recent immigrants, particularly from Mexico. But a lot of times families don't know about the services, and particularly immigrant communities, they don't necessarily have the same types of services that we have here. And so they were just simply not aware. But then once we presented them that this is what can happen in this situation here, they were more open to learning, more open to listening, and more open to participate. But we assume that people know, and a lot of times they don't know. They don't know systems, they don't know services, they have never accessed them, and particularly those who come from a country that might be different from ours as well. Stuff. I saw Lynn with her hand up, and I know that's enough.
Yeah, hey, I just want to say I really appreciate you guys engaging us in this conversation and also sharing some of your personal, your background of how you come to this work. And I really appreciate the conversation about authenticity, because I really think if we don't start as authentic people and as who we are, and like Brana said, acknowledging who we are as individuals and where, the cultural background that we come from. If we don't start there, I don't think we're going to get anywhere. And I think it's oftentimes difficult for white, privileged, American grown, American raised, Protestant, whatever individuals. We often think we don't have culture. Well, that's not true, but so it starts with knowing ourselves. And then, like you said, engaging authentically with the people that we want to engage with. I also appreciate, Brian, you bringing up the statistics about, Iowa's 4% Black, African American, and half of those, if I understood you right, half of those people live in those 4 cities.
Yeah, 49 and change. 49%, I just rounded up, but basically 50% live between Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, Waterloo, and Davenport.
That's stunning to me. I've never heard that before. So
you
are the numbers man.
It's not stunning to me because
exactly.
You want to be in communities where you see somebody else that looks like you, but also where you feel safe. And there are communities where people of color do not feel safe, and it's nothing that is even expressed or nothing that is actually done to them. But you can feel when you're welcome and wanted, actually, so to speak. So
you get in where you fit in. So where there's already a community, that's where I'm gonna go. Quick example: I lived in Iowa since 1998. Came for the summer. Don't judge, Brian. I travel to say it's part of my job, and I spend a lot of my time in the more urban parts of the state. Nothing explicitly happened to me, but last year around this time, I went to Creston, and just going to Creston, I'm like, feels a little different. Just because I was aware of there's a cultural shift, just because I just went to Creston and go, so this is where Iowa is. Okay, that's what I thought I was gonna find. Okay. So tongue in cheek there, but that honestly, again, that's why you will see a lot of those statistics, Lynn, is that once there is a footprint of a community, the community goes, this is like coming from Chicago, this is where you're going to go. So for those that have questions about where do we start, if you create a community where people start to come in, it will begin to really get momentum and grow from there.
I see Diane has a question.
Yeah, so when we're talking about this, I just don't want to miss an opportunity to advocate for this, because I'm advocating for it as much as I can. I'm trying to find trainings for working with people from African cultures. I'm finding that I'm working more and more with that population. And if I have to say where I feel the most culturally incompetent, it would be in that area. And we just don't have I haven't been able to find a lot of, and I realize Africa's a giant country and there's a lot of different cultures and all that stuff, but I just haven't been able to find something to help me navigate those areas better. So that's just, I just want to advocate anytime I can, because that's what I'm really trying to find. So if anybody knows of something or whatever, let me know.
And to Dee's point, so much we've talked about from the Black experience is the African American experience. So once you again blend in, and Derek talked about it a bit in his chat as well, those individuals who are new Americans that come from another country, period. But again, those individuals from the continent of Africa and the continent of Africa with several countries within that. So there will never be, we're not a monolith. There is no one size fit all. But again, that's a diversity within the diversity within the diversity.
Yeah, I think you will be more beneficial in finding training around engagement and how to begin to, develop those relationships with communities of color. I don't think there's one blueprint to say, here's how you work with an African, here's how you work with a group, but it's more around how do you begin to build relationships with communities of color, and how do you begin to develop that trust within those communities of color that you should be looking for.
Yeah, I just am hoping to get, because of the the trauma from that refugee status, which is an extra added part
Absolutely.
to that.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that's where I feel, I'm feeling a bit stuck.
Absolutely. Yeah. Other thoughts from others? I know Amy, I don't know how we're looking at time. I know we don't want to dominate the agenda, but amazing topic.
What I'd like to propose, and I don't know what this looks like, but I guess I really want to thank Derek and Brian. And we don't have to stop the conversation, immediately. Look at Kyra and her big dog. Sorry, that was just good. I saw that dog jump up and lick you. Sorry. No, don't be. I just agree. I so appreciate that you guys came and helped facilitate the beginning of this sort of conversation, and the fact that I think we really need to have it on every agenda, but even more so, maybe even have those that are interested come together for some very focused work that can come back. I think the coalition meeting as a whole is just limited in the time and the space to maybe do the work that we really need to do. And so I would like to propose that we kind of look at multiple avenues for keeping this moving forward, because we need to. And I think most of us are a little lost on how to do it. And so if we can do some of that together, let's do it together. Derek made a comment earlier about the collective impact work. And I just wanted to say one thing about that is the first time I kind of learned about it, one of the things that was really front and foremost in the discussions is you can't work to try to address complex social problems without having those who are affected by it not at the table. So when we talk about any of our work that we want to move forward, if we're not including representation of the people who are most affected by it, we won't make the difference we want to make. So I think that's, if it's disability, if it's equity and inclusion and unrepresented, underrepresented populations, they have to be at the table to help us figure out how to navigate in our system to address the issues, concerns, questions, needs, all of that. So I know that we will run out of time. We have partner updates, but I just want to pause for a second and say, are there any other comments or questions at this point for Derek and Brian?
As an educator and a consultant, I listened a lot, and I want to say thank you, because I bring these parents into the schools, and many times they ignore our phone calls. They don't want to come into the schools because of trauma, or because they're simply scared. They don't know how to react. And if you just listen, and that's what they want to, they want to be able to be heard. That makes a big difference. I had one parent that he would ignore my phone calls, and finally I have a Zoom number, and so I was able to let him know who I was, and he told me that he had trust issues, so we were able to talk through that. And when he came in, he told me his background. And when I got my administration degree, one of the classes I had to take was on Native American history. And I will tell you, if you look at me, I'm definitely Caucasian, but my great grandfather's last name was DeWolf. So I was able to make some connections with him, and we shared that. Now our trust is like this, because we were able to have some very good conversations. So now when he comes to the schools, he looks for me. So you have to listen to them first. So thank you, Derek, for stating that. And I'm sorry, I got a little emotional because I feel a lot of times we go into those meetings with an agenda, and the parents and the students aren't always the first on the agenda.
I appreciate you sharing that, Heather, and I also appreciate you identifying, because I think we do get caught up into what our eyes tell us, and they don't tell the whole story. I think we're going to get to a point in this society where you're not going to be able to determine and trust your eyes and who you are seeing as you're there. I've had conversation with a friend of mine. He was talking about his mother. She was Native American, and she was in line at a grocery store, and a guy was going on about how these foreigners would just go back to where they come from and blah, 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 blah. And she said, you know, I was here before you was here. But you know, you can't trust your eyes on what you are seeing. And so we're getting to a point where it's going to require us to take the time to understand, to have dialogue. But I think we also, and Amy, I would recommend that we have that conversation around how do we move from these safe spaces where people don't want to offend, but how do we get to where we having these authentic, thought-provoking discussions where we are brave, and that people feel brave enough to say, well, this is what I feel, you know, like what Brian talked about, how his mom named him. I have a brother named Gary, my sister's named Sue, and I'm Derek. And I asked my mom, I said, why didn't you name me Jaheim? Why didn't you name me Raheem? One of them cool names. Well, I had to be Derek.
Exactly.
But people don't have those kind of conversations, you know, and we have to be comfortable having those kind of conversations. And I think it starts with us just kind of taking the time to creating an environment where people feel brave.
Derek, as you just said that, Heather means purple flower. That is Native American, purple flower.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Oh my God, that's great.
Yeah.
Hey, Heather, I want to thank you for your example, because what your example, that one very specific example with that father, is a lot of what you will see if you authentically do this type of work, is because there is such sparse opportunities and occasions for disenfranchised people to find safety with the greater group, that when we find someone, whether you want to or not, that's the other piece to be prepared for. Whether you want to or not, you now become that champion, that advocate. So guess what? If someone's trying to connect with the school, don't call the school. You better call Heather, because Heather gets it, and because I trust Heather. So that's the other piece of it. Why, and I mean that both. Great job, Heather. But to think about this at a big scale is that if you're good at doing this, you may find that you now become the representation of either the industry or a part of that industry, because y'all get it. All right. And that's the other part. A lot of time we plan for not doing our job so great, but we don't plan, well, what if we're really good at this? You know, and everybody starts calling and knocking on the door and referring their friends. And you know what? Sometimes they refer people that can't even utilize our services, but guess what? You were helpful to me. And I have a friend, a family member that is struggling. So I don't care what your job duty is. I heard you're helpful. You're a friend. You're safe. So everybody I know that's struggling, they're going to call Heather. So then Heather needs to then, again, this is a collaboration piece going, you know what, not my corner of the sky, but the people that I trust that do that are over here. So that's the big piece that always is part of this, is not only if you want to do outreach to a marginalized community, great, do that, but make sure that you are also in your toolkit. This is Iowa. We need the white folks. We do. Do you have that? I'm so sorry. Do we have that group of trust around you? Because remember, every person that you trust becomes the people that you serve that they can trust. Your toolkit becomes theirs. So you have to make sure that as you're working, collaborating with folks, that before you refer someone on or hand someone off to someone, that they also have this equal commitment. Because we talk about all the time, it's really easy to do damage, right? So a bad referral is worse than no referral. It really is. It really is. So think about that. And the last piece before I hush again is, Heather, I'm also 12% Irish. So come St. Patrick's Day, look me up. Okay.
My husband is too, so we're a great combination.
Absolutely. I did the whole thing with Ancestry. We spit in a little cup and they found 12%. And I don't know where, but cool. So, all right, we're all good.
Ryan, one thing, I want everybody to remember what you said based off, I put it in my notes about having that safe space to have a break.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everybody else too. Thank you.
Thank you so, so much. I'm sorry that we are having to kind of cut the conversation short.
We had the conversation. I shouldn't say had. We started the conversation. That's the most important part.
Exactly it. We've started and we're just going to keep having and keep working. So thank you. And thanks for all of you who shared comments in the chat, spoke up, shared from your perspective, your response, your experience. I greatly appreciate that engagement as well. All right, so we are at 12:25. We are gonna keep moving forward. I know this is kind of a long Zoom meeting, but I know we're gonna run out of time. So if folks need to take a break, please just feel comfortable if you need to get up and move. But I am gonna turn it over to Leanne Moskowitz, if that's okay. Jess, can you make sure that Leanne is a co-host? And I also wanted to just mention, Leanne, you were available, correct, for the Employment First Community of Practice, which is going to be March 9th, and it's 1 to 2:30. And so, you know what, we just need like 100 Leanne Moskowitzes because we all just like want to dominate her time. And
I need 100 Leanne Moskowitz.
No,
I need a doppelganger or something.
more than one for what is put on your plate. But my hope is just to let folks know that Employment First Community of Practice on March 9th is going to be totally dedicated to Leanne and updates and questions and answers. So if we can't get everything in today, we will be sharing, a reminder and an announcement with folks, but that's just a good thing to know about that's coming up. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Leanne. Thank you.
All right, I will try to keep it brief with the time constraints in mind today. So I did send a report over to Amy. I also sent the employment data over to Amy and Jess, so you guys can all have that information. So I'm just gonna kind of hit the highlights here. And then if you have any questions, and let the next person come on down. So it's important to know that the PHE will end on May 11th. The public health emergency, at the federal level related to COVID-19 is ending on May 11th. The continuous eligibility maintenance of effort during the PHE ends on April 1st. Beginning April 1st, Medicaid members who may have not had a redetermination in a couple of years, members who have been kept on Medicaid who no longer meet Medicaid eligibility services will go through a full redetermination of eligibility starting in April. And it'll come in waves, right? It'll over the next 12 months, the goal is to get through the entire Medicaid population for redetermination. And CMS has given states specific guidelines and criteria that they have to follow. We need to give notice. We need to use multiple modalities of attempting to contact people. So meaning, telephone, letter, social media, whatever. I was just looking at a report that came in today from the MCOs. They report quarterly to us on the amount of face-to-face contacts that HCBS members had during the prior quarter, as well as the number of collateral contacts or telephonic contacts that case managers or care coordinators have had with members during the prior quarter. And the number of people for whom an MCO is unable to contact is amazing. I find it really hard. I struggle with, because we have so many people, and these folks are all getting services, right? They have a service provider involved, but they're not to be reached. So if you're working with members, it's important to know that they're going to start getting a series of letters or mail from Iowa Medicaid. Their first thing they're going to get is a postcard. That postcard is going to inform them that the redetermination period, or that the continuous eligibility maintenance of effort period's ending, and that they will be subject to redetermination, to be looking for those redetermination papers in the mail. We are also onboarding a third managed care company. Molina will start delivering services July 1st. And so that postcard will also inform them of the open choice period. And so members are going to be reassigned. So about 33% of Iowa Total Care's population today, 33% of AmeriGroup's population today will be reassigned to Molina. And members will receive that notification if they were one that had been reassigned. And they will have open choice period. That open choice period runs from April 1st until May 18th. So members will have until May 18th to say, no, I don't want to go to Molina. I want to stay with Iowa Total Care. I don't want to go to Molina. I want to stay with AmeriGroup, and express their choice. Or, hey, I'm a brand new member. I've been assigned to Molina and I'd prefer to go with Iowa Total Care. So they'll be able to exercise that choice up through May 18th. And then from May 18th to July 1st, that person is locked in, because that's how the cap payments will be determined for July for Molina and the reassignment. So we have to have it like a stop date, and so that Molina can get all of the necessary information for their prospective membership. Care plans, service plans. We're working really hard to ensure that there's a warm handoff between MCO so that no one gets dropped in the gaps. We've learned a lot of lessons. We've done this a few times over the last 6-7 years. And so we've learned a few lessons and are applying them here. We want to make sure there's a warm handoff from one MCO to another so that people don't get lost in the shuffle. Then after July 1st, members will have an additional 90 days to change managed care companies for whatever reason. My doctor's not in this group. I really want to stay with my case manager over at that, managed care organization, whatever reason. They'll have that 90 days. And then after that 90 days, the member will only be able to change MCOs for good cause. And there's a series of reasons and rules for good cause. One of them would be that you have an established relationship with your primary care physician and they're not in the network for the MCO I'm with. Or my MCO no longer contracts with my PCP and I want to go to the MCO that does. So that would be a reason for good cause to change. Established relationships is another good cause reason. So anyway, be talking to the people that you're serving, supporting, make sure they're looking for that mail. If they've moved, if they've had a phone number change, an address change, it's so important that they call in and to the member services line and communicate that information. They don't want to be terminated because they missed a piece of mail. So anything you can do to help folks stay eligible. We do have this link here for the unwind. It talks about the unwind phases. It gives specific information for members. So I recommend visiting that website. There's also an email in that website where you can send your direct questions regarding the continuous eligibility unwind. Again, there is going to be a lot flying at members in the next 3 to 4 months. And anything we can do to try and support people, put them on the alert for mail, make sure their information with the department is current is going to be so important. We don't want anybody falling between the cracks. Bad things happen when people fall between the cracks. So the 1915I flexibilities will end on April 11th, but the department has drafted a temporary extension of those flexibilities for the 1915I to extend them out the 6 months post PHEN, like the HCBX flexibilities. So what that means is those flexibilities will all end on November 11th. So between May 11th and November 11th, the department will make final determinations as to those flexibilities that will continue post PHE that we will need to make amendments to our HCBS waivers for. And so we'll be communicating and engaging folks as we go along that, but stay tuned. If you're interested in the specific HCBS flexibilities, I've included that link here for you all. Town halls, don't forget about the town halls. Another thing that Medicaid is doing is we're having 2 monthly member town halls during this realignment, reassignment, redetermination phases for these members, so that folks can have that forum twice a month to ask any questions, talk about any issues they've encountered with the redetermination processes and the reassignment processes, and get their questions answered. So those are now twice a month, starting this month through starting in February through probably July or so, or August. I can't remember how far out the calendar, but if you go to that link that I posted here, the calendar of those town halls are posted, and you can go and register for each of those town halls. And you need to register so you get the link to participate. HHS alignment, still going strong on HHS alignment. They've already talked about that 1,500-page bill. We've created new divisions within HHS, have hired a lot of new staff throughout the different HHS divisions. They've renamed some divisions. I would have to pull out an org chart to tell you what the new names are. I'm still kind of sticking with the old in my head. I haven't quite converted that over yet, but I'm working on it. So there is a website for all things HHS alignment. If you have questions, concerns, you can get on that website, email those folks, and they'll get back to you. American Rescue Plan Act, I won't go into the details. We're still working through the health information technology and remote monitoring grant applications. We are distributing the first round of employee training and scholarship grant dollars today. There were 57 applications total. We got through 26. So we reviewed all of the applications that were submitted before November 20th. Those applications that came in after November 20th are going to be reviewed and after we get through the HIT and remote monitoring grants. These HIT and remote monitoring grant applications was a huge lift for the team. It may seem like we only have 74 applications, but one application could have 9 or 10 projects on it, which requires a lot of time and effort to kind of dissect all the pieces and moving parts and make sure that they're actually things that will expand, enhance, or improve HCBS. So today we distributed about $1.3 million to that first round of 26 providers. So hopefully those dollars will do a lot of good for folks. Direct service job board and hiring resource and the LMS, we got our responses back on those RFIs, and we're going to be working on RFPs for both of those projects. I anticipate that those RFPs will hit the bricks probably late March, early April. Um, community-based services evaluation, and I think Brooke started to mention this earlier. So we contracted under our ARPA projects with Mathematica, and they subcontracted with Harkin Institute to conduct the community-based service evaluation. That evaluation has been completed. They have posted their report, their evaluation report online. They have also, if you didn't tune in to the last member town hall, they provided a presentation on their findings and recommendations. I've provided a link to that presentation here in my document for you. And so there's going to be a lot going on in the world of HCBS in the next 3 to 5 years. We are looking at, streamlining processes for folks. We're looking at aligning services across the waivers so that people have equal access to services regardless of the clinical criteria that they fall under or their diagnostic criteria that they fall under. And also looking at how do we maximize our HCBS services. And so you've probably heard a lot about realigning the waivers. I'm thinking, there's several different options that have been presented. Doing waivers based on where you reside, whether it be a community-based or residential based waiver, doing a combined waiver. So perhaps, we've talked for years. I went back and looked at my notes, and 10 years ago, we were talking about combining HD-PD and the AIDS HIV waivers because they're all, similar health and disability needs, making a fulsome menu of services, those types of things. So, but we're not sure yet because we want to do stakeholder engagement. There is a lot of opportunity for stakeholder engagement. I would go out to that website here, this hhsiowa.gov/CBSE. That's where all of the materials and the links to all the materials is located, as well as opportunities to be engaged in stakeholder listening sessions. Mathematica is going to start holding a series of stakeholder listening sessions on these various findings and recommendations to gain stakeholder input as to which methodologies the department should pursue. So stay tuned. Innovations Work Group, we're going to have the next HCBS Innovations Work Group on February 27th. We're going to have folks from IWD talk to us about the healthcare apprenticeship program grants that are coming out. And so we'll take probably the first half an hour or so of the meeting to talk about that. And then we're going to dive into looking at other states and how they utilize remote supports. We know that we are going to need to embrace remote supports in multiple service lines as we continue to deal with a direct care workforce crisis. The recruitment and retention funds helped folks to attract more people, but it didn't bring more people to Iowa. And we know that we're going to continue to face a direct care workforce shortage long into the future. And we really need to be innovative in our strategies of how we get people essential services and supports in face of the staffing challenges. Got a lot going on with HCBS waiver stuff. I won't bore you with that right now, but we've got several that are in the hopper for renewal with CMS. We do put those out for 30-day public notice to gain public notice when prior to submission to CMS. We've already did the HD and PD last year. CMH waiver and eligibility waiver renewals are up this year, and you'll likely see those public put out for public consumption and review. I want to say mid-March. I think that we're targeting the second week in March to get that out for public notice. Training opportunities. I see Courtney was on. We've got our competency-based training website. Go out and visit that. All the archive materials, the recorded presentations, any handouts, any FAQs that went along with all of those trainings are currently being archived on that website. When we have an LMS, I anticipate all that information will live on that LMS. Informational letters. There's been quite a bit. Again, that's a way that we communicate. There's been a lot of informational letters about the continuous eligibility unwind and things like that. And so it's important that folks stay tuned to those. just a quick down and dirty on the employment data, some of my observations. The total number of individuals competitively employed increased slightly in October. So you can see, and I only provided information going back to April of 2021. We have it further back if somebody would like to see that, but kind of hard to squeeze it all on the same, 8x11 sheet of paper. So we can see though that we're moving the needle little by little on the number of folks that are competitively employed. So BI waiver, we're at 14% now, started at 9.23. HAB, we're at 22% as of October, started at 15.7. ID waiver, we're at 28%. We started at 20.8%. So we have been making incremental progress. I'm happy about that. ISC participation, individual placement and support, their only evidence-based SE service under habilitation. Lynn will talk about Aspire here in a minute. We do have had minimal participation, but that doesn't mean people aren't getting the service. I think a lot of the services are either funded through VR or through MHDS right now. What I'm reporting on is Medicaid numbers. So for IPS SE, one of our partners reported that 2 members had claims paid during the quarter. That's why we're only seeing 2 here. However, our other partner reported that they have 16 members that were authorized for IPS SE during October. They just hadn't made an outcomes payment during that period of time. So we are starting to see more Medicaid individuals start to access that service. So happy about that. And hopefully we can get some more folks on board in different areas of the state. ISE has declined for the second consecutive reporting period. So our individual supported employment, you can see that we didn't have anyone with a claim paid in October for BI waiver. We only had 12 people with habilitation, and they're at an all-time low, right? So if you go back and look at April of 21, we had 58 folks in HAB who were getting individual supported employment to 12 during October of 21. Now we've dealt with the PHE, right? We should be coming out the other side. So hopefully we'll start seeing these numbers improve for January, and we'll get January's data will be ready in April. Got a little bit of lag there. Same thing for ID waiver. Back in April 21, we're at 86. We've dropped down to 14. So we really want to monitor that and see what's going on. I know the direct care workforce crisis is having a direct impact on supported employment. You think about supported employment is typically provided in a one-to-one environment. So again, the need for remote support. Can we do some of these supports remotely for folks so that we can maximize the staff that we do have in the system to deliver these important services? Long-term job coaching. So increased for all 3 groups during this reporting period. So that was a nice little bright side. I was happy to see that. We had quite a significant increase for the HAB population, a little bit of decrease for ID. So I probably need to take that back. So ID waiver did decrease. I did email the MCO because I wanted to get confirmation that number was right, because that seemed like quite a bit of a dip, and it, we want to find out what's going on in the data there. Pre-vocational services is at the lowest that it has been. And so is career exploration. I think that's a direct relation to the settings rules coming up. And I think providers, as they have realized that, we're really don't want to pay for sheltered workshop services anymore. And we really need community integrated pre-voc. I think a lot of providers have just stepped back and said, I'm not going to do that anymore. And we know some that we were not sure they were going to meet the settings requirements, just said, I'm going to stop. Problem is, I think all those people are getting funneled to DayHab, and I'm not so sure they're focusing on employment. So continuing to address that as we can, and hopefully our employment specialists are also seeing the same data in their own employment data and addressing that with their case managers, and really having those employment first conversations that's a thing that concerns me about these transitions out of Glenwood too. Is employment part of that conversation? Are we solely focused on the residential service and then day hab to supplement? You know, I'm concerned that employment isn't part of the conversation. So I'm talking to our new transition specialist that we hired onto the LTSS team about that. So that's kind of down and dirty on the employment data. Wages are all right. We do see for small group supported employment for the HAB population, their wages continue to be below sub-minimum wage. And, you know, we expect folks that are getting supported employment to earn at least minimum wage. So we'll need to dig in at the individual level on that a little bit. So that's it. Hopefully I didn't take too much time. I was talking as fast as I could.
No, you did fabulous, Leanne. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry about the time limit.
Sure.
But we'll have that opportunity at the community of practice to dive deeper into these things. And then all the things that Leanne referenced are in that Google folder as well. And I think you just presented a number of really important sort of system things that we need to continue to sort of have on our radar and then work towards trying to get some improvement in some of those areas and what can we do as a collective. Bill, I see that you have your hand up for Leanne, so I'm going to let you ask or make a comment.
I do. Leanne would be surprised if I didn't have a question, right? But you always, thank you, Leanne. You always amaze me with how you can present a lot of stuff in a real concise way. And I appreciate that. I'm just curious with respect to Molina, how it's going. I know in the past when new MCOs would start or in the beginning, they were having difficulty getting providers to sign on. How is that going for them? Are they getting a diverse group? And not just with respect to medical, but a lot of the HCBS providers are more crucial to families almost than their docs. So just curious.
Yep, I think it's going pretty well. I think they've onboarded a lot more. Once we finally got a final copy of the provider manual in hand, I think providers, once they had that, they were more willing to contract a credential. So we've been spending a lot of time with them. We've been spending a lot of time with them on the provider enrollment files, making sure that they are reaching out to all of those providers that are in the network, that are in Medicaid network to get those folks enrolled, paying particular attention to the folks on HCBS. One thing we've told them too is that when they start to get member service information, that if they notice that a provider in a plan is not in their network, then they need to make direct outreach to those providers to encourage them to enroll. We can't tell them that, hey, I've got, hey, Hope Haven, your members are enrolled now with Molina. We can't tell them that because of privacy issues. But what we can say is we're pretty sure you're going to have some folks assigned to us. Don't you want to contract with us? So they are working on that. And I feel really positive. I think the onboarding has been going really well. I think that they're asking great questions. And I really feel like they've built a deep team with good experience and with Iowa experience. And so I think that, their director is our former Medicaid director. So she knows her stuff when it comes to Iowa Medicaid. And so I think it's going to be a good experience for folks. And I really like the interactions that we're having with the LTSS staff that they've hired so far, and the conversations about transitions and onboarding and making sure we're having that warm handoff for folks as they're coming in and ensuring that they have all the information they need. So I feel really positive and really, really good about this one. My personal opinion, of course.
That's incredibly encouraging, though. Thank you. Thank you, Leanne. Thank you, Bill, for bringing that up as well. All right. So Lynn, can you give us just a quick, Lynn shared an Aspire update. The materials are in the share folder. And she reached out during the meeting just to say, you know, really probably the next coalition meeting is probably a good time to spend more time on that as well, because it'll be a little bit further along in the process. So she's just going to do kind of the Cliff Notes version update for now, and we'll do more in the future.
Yep, thanks, Amy. I appreciate that. And I'm gonna leave my camera off. I apologize. I'm a little under the weather today, so you really don't want to see me. So IPS, the Individual Placement and Support Model of Supported Employment, it's the evidence-based practice of supported employment for people with serious mental illness. And we have 5 sites currently operating in Iowa, 2 in northern Iowa and 3 in southeast Iowa, and they're all doing really well. They have all had their annual fidelity reviews now, and they've all scored well also. So we just completed 2 of those reviews last week with Darcy, Sherry, and myself. Darcy Siebold is our full-time trainer fidelity reviewer now, and she will continue to be mentored through the Aspire project this year with Sandy Reese from the National IPS Employment Center, and also Sherry. We've retained Sherry as kind of a consultant. So we're in a period right now where we've issued a call out for hopefully some more sites that will want to be stood up this spring and summer. We are hoping for 2 to 4 new sites. Those applications are due February 28, and will be a selection committee will be reading those applications and scoring them and making the selections by, I think the date is March 24, like the 3rd week of March. So we will know more at the next coalition meeting.
Any questions or comments for Lynn? Thank you so much, Lynn. Really appreciate the quick update for folks. Do we have anybody from APSI that wants to make an announcement or share anything? Okay. So one of the things that I know we had mentioned earlier, that we would send out follow-up related to some of the earlier discussions and this guardianship, conservatorship to get feedback. I'm going to include in that one of the things that we need to ask all of you is what configuration is going to work best for folks for coalition meetings looking at the future. What we found, I mean, we basically changed today's meeting to be virtual primarily because of the snowstorm coming. However, we did notice that there were a lot more folks who had registered virtually than were planning to come in person, and we get that. We understand why that might be. So the core team had a meeting earlier this week. One of the things they discussed was maybe we look at kind of this hybrid approach where we maybe have 1 or 2 meetings in person that are full day meetings a year, where we allow, you know, the front end of the meeting to maybe be virtual, where there's updates and information sharing. And then after that, we move to just all in-person work for the rest of the meeting time, where we can work together on different things. You know, maybe we keep the in-person meeting and full day meetings. Obviously, it's much harder to get a lot of content or as much content in as we want in a virtual structure because of the reduced time, and then also just the ability to do much work in small groups or work together or discussions. I think that's a dynamic that changes a bit through the Zoom platform or the virtual platform. So we're gonna put some questions out to you guys as coalition members about what you want and need, and we will try to be responsive to that and make adjustments as we need to, because we want it to work for folks. So be looking for that. Any other questions or comments before we wrap up? So if you haven't, please reserve May 25th, August 24th, and November 16th, because those are our next quarterly meetings. I am going to end today's meeting. I'm not fast. I wish I were. In honor of Black History Month, in honor of all the things that we talked about today, in honor of the work where we want people to have opportunity, this is where we're going to end today's meeting.